Turn quickly to Acts chapter 14, if you would. I love this passage. It's the first missionary journey, or a section of it. A lot of times people ask me what my vision is for the church. And I don't know, there's a part of me that finds, I usually know what they mean by that, but there's a part of me that finds that to be an uncomfortable question, because I feel like it puts me in too lofty a position, to editorialize on what I think the church should be doing. But when I read passages like this, I can sink my teeth into it. And I think, this is kind of what I think it should be like. Acts 14, the first verse, and we'll just skip around a little bit. In Iconium, they entered the Jewish synagogue as usual and spoke in such a great way that a great number of both Jews and Greeks believed. There's a lot in there already. It says that they entered the Jewish synagogue as was usual, and they spoke in such a way. They had a way of speaking that they knew they had to commit themselves to. They had a way of going about the work to the right places in the right cities. They had a custom. They had a missiological custom. In verse 2, but the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. So they stayed there a long time and spoke boldly for the Lord, who testified to the message of his grace by enabling them to do signs and wonders. There's already a lot in that. Opposition is normal. Tension in sharing the gospel and in do ministry is normative. But what did they do? They just continued longer and they spoke more boldly. So I see there not only an awareness that they need to go about this a certain way, and not just a commitment to doing that on a regular basis, but also a commitment to enduring through the difficulty and staying at the work regardless of, what the moment throws their way. Verse 4, but the people of the city were divided, some siding with the Jews and others with the apostles, when an attempt was made by both the Gentiles and the Jews with their rulers to mistreat and stone them. Okay, my day just got better. They found out about it and fled to the Lycaonian towns of Lystra and Derbe and the surrounding countryside. And there they what? Cowered in a corner? No, they continued to preach the gospel. So in Lystra, there was this man who was without feet and strength. They healed him. I'm going to skip forward. People saw that they had this capacity to heal those that nobody else could heal. And so they bow down to them and begin to worship them as gods. And Paul's like, guys, you don't get it. Skip to verse 19. Some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium, and when they went over the crowds, they stoned Paul. So from one minute they're going to, oh my goodness, they are gods, let us worship them, to wanting to stone them again. Talk about a fickle crowd. My Sundays feel better too. So they stoned Paul, and they dragged him out of the city thinking he was dead. And after the disciples gathered around him, he got up and went into the town, and the next day he left with Barnabas for Derbe. Verse 21, now it gets really good. After they had preached the gospel in that town and made many disciples, that's one of only 3 occurrences of a verb to make disciples in the New Testament. After they had preached the gospel, by the way, and made many disciples, because the word preaching the gospel doesn't assume a response. The verb make disciples does assume a response. So they preach the gospel, and sometimes when you do that, you make disciples. Sometimes you just preach the gospel, right? But here God gave them the grace of seeing people come to saving faith. They made disciples. They returned then to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, strengthening the disciples by encouraging them to continue in the faith and telling them it's necessary to go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. Instead of the reactionary, what are we going to do about this war on Christianity? Making bumper stickers and t-shirts. Oh, we're so persecuted, it shouldn't be this way. We have rights. Instead, Paul gathers them together and says, guys, it's going to be like this. This is how it's going to be. Verse 23. When they had appointed elders for them in every church and prayed with fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had believed. Okay, so you ask me, what's my vision for the church? Well, it's a lot like that. I think it should look like that. I think there's a tendency for the church to get sidetracked by all kinds of stuff, so that the only way we can see that is when we read the text. That's the only time we even come close to that a lot of times, because we're so busy with other concerns. I want to talk a little bit about the last couple of years, and then I want to talk about the year ahead. See on the slide before, well, not the one that's behind me, but it has said throughout the week that it can't be the same. And it can't. I think if all of us are honest, if you've read any kind of statistics, you know what's going on in our culture. People are going to church less. Young people are in droves choosing to be nunners associated with no religious background and at least skeptical of the institutional church. All the while, much of the church is just going on as though nothing has ever changed. That is the ostrich with its head in the sand, church. We need to be frustrated, we should be saddened, we should be alarmed, and we should be feeling a sense of urgency for our call in this day, and I want to talk about that, about what we do and what we're called to do in the church. So the last couple of years, what have we done? Well, let me talk about that, and I don't know, hopefully say it in a way that contextualizes some things. I see three things that we've been doing, and it has been a lot of in-house change. I get that, and I've had a lot of people tell me there's too much change too quickly, and I understand that, and I sympathize with that. I don't necessarily know what to do about it, but things are what they are now. We've done what we've done over the last couple of years, and here's how I see those changes. We were, first of all, updating things. Someone said, saying that you were fixing things makes it sound like everything before you came was wrong. I never meant to imply that. When I came in, I saw a robust church with a healthy background in member care, a healthy background in community evangelism and outreach and creative outreach, a healthy teaching ministry. I saw all kinds of very strong things that have been here for many years. And one of the reasons that Jan and I came was because we knew this church had that history. But alongside some of those good things over the years were years that went by, and I would say decades that went by without any concern for change. Meanwhile, the culture all around us was changing in drastic ways, in dramatic ways, giving us the illusion that all we have to do is come on Sunday and everything will be back the way it was. And of course, that's not true. So we've been making updates, really just revising things so that we can more effectively interact with contemporary culture. I'm trying to say these things very carefully. My view is not that we get drums and we have updated music so we can appeal to a contemporary culture. That's not how I want to say that. We have drums and a particular kind of music because, church, listen to this, we are a contemporary culture. Nobody here lives in 1971. You can't, because it's gone now. We can't go back there. You can't live in, you wouldn't want to sing the music, trust me, of 1497 in Europe. You would not like it. Things changed. And the reason we sing contemporary music is because we live now. And especially in light of the fact that so many young people are seeing the church as being irrelevant, it's time to, pardon the expression, face the music. And so we made some changes, and we do our best to blend yesterday, going back so far, and today. We believe that we need to do that because we have believers of multi-generations here, and that's a healthy thing, and we want to encourage that. But this church has gone for decades without any kind of change, and that's why we felt like it was necessary, not to fix things, but to revise them to be more contemporary. We were also refocusing. I wanted to see us begin to look to the future and not just to the past. One of the things that concerned me as I had conversations at First Baptist for well over a year was that during that time I had 0 conversations about winning young people. Now, I had lots of conversations, but there were none about the future. There were none about young people. And I'm not saying a few. I'm not exaggerating when I say there were none, almost as though there was not a concern. And I'm not saying that you weren't concerned. I'm saying that this imperative for us was not on our radar. Other things were on our radar. That's not healthy. It's always about the next generation. Jesus set the trajectory when he said, I want you to start this work, go to all nations and all places, and I'll be with you to the end of the age. He took their heads like this, and he said, focus forward and go there. It's going to be through time. You're going to be cutting through time, doing this work until I come back. Move forward, church. And so I felt like we needed to refocus and think about the future and about young people. And that's a very, very hard thing to do today. But we're going to get there. We've also been recalibrating. And what What I mean by that is that we've been trying to find ways to better align with a biblical model of eldership. And I'm not going to beat that horse. We now have an eldership in place. We obviously, clearly believe that better aligns with the biblical data. We have a great board of men. I love the guys we have. To me, the beauty of an eldership was when you finally get the guys in the room and you go, yeah, this is it. And we have the right conversations, and guess what? It doesn't go like this. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. It doesn't do that. Why? Because you got the right guys. They're overseers. That's what that word means. They're gifted to oversee the general direction of the church, and that's their passion. They live at 60,000 feet and ask the hard, profound, right questions. And we're there now, church. I love serving with the guys we have. And I see a lot of strength there that will guide us into the future. It's kind of funny because some of the guys, I even invited some guys to come on the board who function as elders even now. Because they have that gifting and they have that character. They may not want to serve on the board right now, and some do. But most of the guys who are on our board now have been like elders here for decades. We're just now recognizing the biblical framework that allows them to serve the way they do. That's the last couple of years. And it's been hard. It's been tough. There have been times when I've questioned myself. But it hasn't just been me. That's another thing that needs to be cleared up. We haven't taken any direction in any category over any issue that was just me. It's been a plug of leadership. It's always been the pastoral staff, but it's also always been more than that. The deacons have always been together with us on this, the things that we've done. By the way, we'll probably continue to change because that's how things are. I've often said the only thing that doesn't change is dead. Well, even dead things change, but you don't want that kind of change. That's decomposition. We don't want that. We want the right kind of change. And so we'll continue to change, and hopefully we'll make the right changes that reflect where the church needs to be and who we need to be. And that's what I want to talk about now. I want to talk about moving forward and what is needed next. So let me do that. And I want to talk about 3 challenges that we have. The first one is that we, as evangelical Christians, are losing our voice in the culture. Now, I don't say that to suggest correctives, because I don't know that it needs to be corrected. The church has been very effective in many contexts where it doesn't have a voice. We don't need a media-driven voice in order to be effective. And I'll suggest that you just look to the church in China for empirical evidence of that. Or any place where the church is persecuted and is thriving. It has its problems, it has its challenges and difficulties. I'm talking culturally, though. Culturally, we're losing our voice. People now, and I hate to say this, and it's complicated for me too, but we got to think through it. So it's okay. People are suspicious of the word evangelical. You know, when I was younger in ministry, evangelical was the happy word. That was the good one that was the go-to word, because back in those days, we were called fundamentalists. Remember that? And fundamentalists, by the way, didn't have negative connotations. Fundamentalists were people who adhered to a certain number of core principles or fundamentals of the faith, which, by the way, we still believe. So technically, we're still fundamentalists. But that word has been hijacked now, and it carries with it all this kind of baggage and all this kind of confusion and negativity. Now we're feeling the same thing with the word evangelical, and there's a number of reasons for that. There was years ago when I was in ministry, and young guys were sitting around trying to think of, well, what will the next word be? Because we saw the day coming when evangelical wasn't going to be accepted anymore. What's the next word going to be? And I remember there was, a number of people who were saying, you know, when evangelical doesn't work anymore, we'll go with biblicist. I'm going, nah, I don't think so. I just don't see that on the T-shirt. You know, what are you? I'm a biblicist. I don't know that we need a word. I mean, whose idea was it that we have to have a word? We don't need a bumper sticker and a T-shirt. It's always going to be complicated, but that's not bad news. When someone says, well, what are you? I mean, I might tell them I'm a Baptist. They don't know what that means. Nobody knows what that means. But that's not bad news. That's good news, because then I can tell them what I am. Or if I tell them I'm a Christian, they don't know what that means, or they think it means 5 opposing different things, because that's how our culture works. So I can clarify. Now I got a conversation. It's actually good news. At any rate, we're losing our voice in the culture. It's a new day. It's not like it used to be. You can't just throw in the buzzwords of Christian think in a conversation and assume that somebody you're talking to knows what you're talking about. We're not there anymore. Those days are gone. So what am I saying? I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying hunker down, build your bunker, buy some canned foods. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying things have changed. We have to think differently. Okay, sorry. I'm whining now. Second, and more profoundly and more sadly, we're losing a generation. We have to look forward instead of looking back, because we're losing a generation of young people who are suspicious of the church, sometimes antagonistic to the church, and are wandering from the church. So many things have changed culturally. When I grew up, it's so funny for me to think of suggesting to my dad that I not go to church on a Sunday. That did not happen. Dad, it's okay if I don't go to church today. I couldn't even say those words. That was not going to happen. Today, it's not assumed that anybody's children will go to church with them. In fact, it's not uncommon at all for parents and their children to go to different churches. Again, I'm not saying, the end of the world. I'm saying it's changed. Things aren't the way they used to be. But behind a lot of that, and more concerning than most of what I just said, is the fact that young people now have these attitudes towards church. And I wanted to talk about them. One of them is just general anti-institutionalism. They're against institutions in general. Government is an institution, and church, in their minds, is another institution. Why not? We've registered with the state. We're a 501c3. We're a registered entity of the state. We operate institutionally. We have teams and committees and boards and motions and counter motions. They see it all as the same thing, as a big political machine. The institutionalism of it all turns them off. And I'm not judging that one way or another. I'm saying that's what is. And I think many Christians don't realize that antipathy exists, that frustration of young people exists, and they don't want church like that. In fact, they find it not to be church. I grew up with it. I have no problems with it. I grew up in a church of 2,000 people. And I was perfectly comfortable with it. I go to one today and I'm comfortable with it. But that's me. It has nothing to do with the younger generations coming up. And so they're responding to the institutionalism, saying that's not real church. They also are frustrated. By the way, these are all things that come up in polls that I have read over and over and over the last number of years. Anti-institutionalism is probably the most frequent complaint that comes up. But one that comes up that's probably right behind it or along with it is that young people are frustrated with the negativism, hypocrisy, and the internal fighting in church. When they see that, they're done. Let's be honest, church, we've had a little bit of history of internal fighting and squabbling. Not over eternal issues, not over even important issues, over matters of procedure, over matters of preference, over matters that have no connection to the eternal whatsoever. And it's all because I think something is important personally. It's my personal preference, not realizing all the time that I'm alienating young people who now see the church as cranky, who see the church as mean, as willing to fight one another. Not the testimony we wanted to leave the generation under us. But it is the testimony. I'm not talking about First Baptist. I'm talking about the church. It is the testimony now that the church has with young people. By the way, the next one is actually the highest growth answer. And this is kind of interesting. In the last several years, which answer has come up more frequently and has grown more than the others? And that is the response that says that the church is too political in its outlook. Young people have felt this for some time, but the numbers have changed quite a bit. In fact, in 2007, a Lifeway poll showed that young people who have left the church because of its political leanings were about 15% that year. This year it's been 25%. Of young people in 2019, 25% left because they said they saw the church as being a political entity or as an organism that's moved for political ends and purposes. Well, we're not. Isn't that the same mistake that they made in Jesus' day? They tried to make him king by force. They tried to turn the Messiah into a political answer to the problems of the day. And we might be, at times, accidentally, at least appear like we're committing the same mistake. Wanting to turn the church into an opportunity to change things politically, so we can change things the way we want them. If we are making that mistake, then we may have lost a good plug of young people and have something to make up for. The last one that I'll mention is probably the most frequent personal comment that was made on polls. Most of these polls, you don't get to choose the language. You ask a question and it's yes or no. But in one of the polls in 2016 that came out, the blank space was left, and this is the one that came up most frequently as a write-in, is that the church often fails to answer questions that are asked sincerely. And I feel this one, I hope it's not true. I'm not saying it's true. I have no way of knowing if it's true, but it has come up a lot in polls. Young people feel like when they go to church with their we just talked about this with our youth today. They feel like when they go to the church and ask their questions, they're vilified for having the questions. Or the people that they talk to aren't able to, in any sense, profound way, approach the questions with a suitable or a helpful answer. I thought, wow, if that's true, how horrifying is that? On some polls, there's actually numbers associated with young people who are leaving because they felt like the church didn't offer the answers that they needed to continue in the faith. And I realize that people carry their objections to the faith with different motivations, and I'm not trying to parse through all that and settle all of that. But I am saying the church should be a place where questions are welcome. Let me talk now, as we talk about moving forward, about a couple of themes and strategies for 2020, and I'm excited about this. When I think about the church being what the church needs to be, this probably isn't enough, but I think it's a good start. And here's some things we're going to do in 2020. The church needs to be, first of all, a place for questions. It needs to become a place for questions. And so in the next year, we're going to refer to FBC Shawnee as a place for questions. And it's going to get real. I mean, it's going to get really practical. Even in services, we're going to have ways you can use your phone to phone in a question that will go and be sifted and then sent back to me, and I'll just take them live. We'll just take live questions from the stage, too. I know we don't normally do that, but why not? Just leave a little bit of time. Yeah, it's risky. You always have the person who asks a question that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, or that's just generally uninformed. That's okay. It's all right. I've often said when I do Q&A things that all the questions are good, it's just that a lot of answers are bad, so all the pressure is on stage. It's fine. You know, if we're really going to be evangelistic in our mindset, we've got to get used to being in a culture and in an environment and in relationships where anybody can ask any kind of a question, youth or not. There's so much more to be said about that, but let's move on. We're going to become a place for questions in the coming year, and you're going to see this slogan a lot. And I'm going to talk in the next few moments about ways all of that's going to cash out. In fact, I want to talk about 4 ways. They're on the slide coming up behind me now. And I'm going to talk about each one of these individually. These are strategies and events that are going to take place at First Baptist in the year 2020. We're going to have an FBC Institute, which is really just a part of our Sunday school program. It will include more than that. I'll say more in just a moment. We're going to have some unique lectures that are presentations and unique speakers who can speak in a specially informed way to topics that are important to people today. We're going to have some seminars. I'll talk about what they are in just a moment. Forums and workshops that help us understand what it means to live the Christian life. And then Ben and I and others will preach on certain topics where we will surround those topics with questions and dialogue about what we as Christians need to know. Now let me talk about those one at a time. The first thing I want to talk about is the FBC Institute. Our Sunday morning program has good Sunday school classes. But I realized some time ago that there is no place when somebody is new to First Baptist and maybe not a believer, or maybe a believer. There's no class for them to come to. I've been meeting with people in my office, and you probably don't know that. But at 9:15, I would meet with people in my office to talk to them about who FBC is, try to find out who they are, and help them get into the church. Most churches have some kind of a class where you can find out about those things, and we're calling that track the introductory class for people who are new to First Baptist, or maybe new to the Southern Baptist Convention. I've talked to a lot of people who've never been in a Southern Baptist church before, and they have questions, usually misunderstandings, about what that means, and I love talking with them about that, because I'm in an awesome position to do that, because I'm also new to the SBC. I've only been in the Southern Baptist Church now I'm going on my 3rd year. So I'm in a great position to talk to them about what that's like. The basic track, though, will take on topics that are typically related to those first steps that a new believer needs to take in growing in their faith. Everything from confession of sin to security of their salvation and so forth. This is going to be a track of 8 weeks that will be rotated. So if you miss a course, then you can sign up for it later. I'll say more about how we do that in a moment. The Next Steps class sort of fills out the mission of what I call FBC Institute. I call it biblical instruction that's going somewhere. What we want to do is make sure that when we have classes, that those classes are helping you know where to go from here. We can sit around and affirm one another in the faith over and over and over and over until we die. And there's a place for that, but obviously we need to be doing more than that. And so the Next Steps track is another 8-week rotation of classes that says, what do I do in my Christian life now? Where do I go from here, and what does that look like? How do my spiritual gifts actually engage the real world? What is spiritual passion? What does it mean to go on a mission trip, and how can I find one? Those kinds of things. And then we'll have an advanced track. We have some of those theological geeks here like myself who would like to dig every hole that could possibly be dug around a text. And what I want to do is take on topics that are particular, probably controversial, and contemporary interest. Sometimes even in the SBC, we have controversial discussions going on about some topic. And these advanced classes will be opportunities you can sign up to hear someone who's trained in an area to teach about those things. So the FBC Institute, it is biblical instruction, but it's instruction that's going somewhere. Now let me talk about how you're going to sign up for that. First of all, if you're in a Sunday school class already on Sunday mornings, it will continue. We're not pulling the plug on any of them. Those can continue to go. Consider the FBC Institute. And guys, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pass out those cards now, if you would. Come down the aisle. Did we get that ready, Donna? Okay, thank you. The temporary ushers are coming by now, and for 25 cents a card. No, I'm just kidding. Those are completely free. Please take one and look at this with me. Each week, you're going to have the opportunity to sign up for a class that hopefully fits where you are and challenges you where you are. Now consider the FBC Institute as, if you'll pardon the expression, I know I'm in a Southern Baptist church, a buy-the-drink opportunity. In other words, you don't have to sign up for an 8-week rotation. I might see one class and go, oh, I'd like to see that. Well, then check it off. And I would encourage you to do it today. But if you don't have enough time to think it through, you can go home, and going live, even while I'm speaking right now, is a web page on our site that allows you to sign into any one of these classes, and it will always be there. So you can sign up at any time. And, if you just want to show up on a Sunday for a class, that's of course fine too. You can certainly do that. You say, who's teaching these classes? Well, a number of people may be, but all of our elders are. And doesn't that make sense? One of the distinctions of an elder is that they be able to teach, to didaktikos. And so our elders are going to take the lead in teaching these classes when they're offered. If nobody signs up for whatever class next week, then we won't have it, and we'll offer it when the rotation comes up again. The point is, there will always be a point of entry. We haven't had a good critical path someone can jump in that helps them kind of move along in their Christian experience, and so that's what's going to happen. If you have any questions, certainly you can see me about that. The next thing that I mentioned that I want to talk about, by the way, you fill these out now, please give us your email or phone number so we can get in touch with you. Oh, and name would be good so we know who we're talking to. Check which classes you want, and you can put it in the box outside the back. There's a box on the table in the foyer off to the side, and I think it says offering on it. Just put those in there, and we'll get those this week. If you want to go home and sign up on the website, that would be fine too. Let me talk about the next thing, lectures. I think this will be great. I am now doing some coursework up at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Michael and I are both up at the seminary taking coursework. I've been so impressed with the guys who are there, right, Michael? Amazing guys. And Tim knows. Tim's, of course, been associated with that for years. I've been talking with them about coming to First Baptist Church and talking about some really interesting topics. And these are some that I have in mind. In fact, I mentioned to the man who kind of heads off the apologetics emphasis in the doctoral program, who said he wants to take the first one, is religious truth knowable, and what is the truth about truth? We'll be having that lecture in June. Here's the deal. The point is to bring people. That's the point. I mean, this is for you too. It's always there for us. But the real point is to bring people, because we live in a culture where truth is a questionable idea at one level or another. And so we're going to bring someone who's given their life to studying in the academic culture these topics from a biblical worldview. Is religious truth knowable in June? In August, we'll talk about whether or not the Gospels are reliable. This is a big deal in apologetics in the United States. Not so much does God exist, that's there, but it's really a minor theme compared to a question of the reliability of the text that we use every week. So we're going to have a specialist come in. I mean, I can do that, of course, but someone who's given their life to the academic pursuit of these issues is going to do it way better than I could. And then in November, perhaps these dates aren't quite locked down just yet. We're going to have someone come and answer the question, why are there so many religions? This is the one you probably, well, all of them are, but certainly this is one that you want to invite some friends to. By the way, because these are academics and professionals, the tone is not going to be accusatory or antagonistic. You're not going to bring your friend and have them browbeat your friend and tell them why they're dumb. That's not going to be the feel of this. This is an academic presentation that objectively looks at various responses in our culture and responds to them from the perspective of the Christian worldview. I think this is a great idea for us to do. And I want to talk more about how it will succeed in just a moment. Seminars. These lectures are what I presented them as, academic presentations. But we're also going to have some seminars that are more of a practical nature, and they're going to be hosted for us by Christ First Counseling Center that meets in our building. If you don't know Ryan Ozias, awesome guy. They have quite a team of people who are offering Christian counseling, and we have used them. They've blessed us in a number of ways. In January, April, July, and October, they're going to come and deal with some issues that are stinging our culture and frustrating our culture because we see what's happening, particularly in the world of our young people. In January, Ryan suggested, this is his topic, they're going to be talking about a topic they refer to as screenagers, about the impact that constant, unending, unbroken, and obsessive access to the internet is having on our young people. An interesting topic. Of course, they're going to be coming from a Christian perspective as well. In April, talk about anxiety. When is anxiety too much? When should I be worried about my level of... Everybody has anxiety, but not everybody has that kind of anxiety. You know what I mean? And so they're going to talk about that issue. And then we'll talk about depression, of course. Depression is not going away, and it is a climbing reality, and all of us look at it and we scratch our heads. It seems to be related to the United States. I travel the world some, and I don't see depression strangling cultures in the same way. In cultures that are much worse off economically than we are, I don't see the same things happening that are here, and they'll be talking about that issue, again, from a biblical perspective. In October, or somewhere about there, October 25th, they're going to talk about youth suicide, something that keeps coming up and just keeps exhausting and sucking the air right out of our lungs every time we hear about it. We need to talk about it. And what does Christianity say about it? So we'll be doing that. As well as lectures, we'll have seminars, and then Ben and I have decided to throw in a few series through the week too, where we talk about, these may not be the topics we end up with, but right now we're leaning towards talking about worldview, talking about the church for a few weeks, and about evangelism, and spending a lot of time in Q&A. So we, as a church, have the opportunity to hear what's on your mind and what you're thinking. By the way, we're going to be harvesting questions through the week, asking you to leave those with us online, or by texting them into us, or by putting them in the box out back as well. So we'll be ready ahead of time, but we're more than willing to take those things live as well. So we are going to become a place for questions. And one of the reasons you can ask your friends to come is because we are going to take on questions. That's why. We need a reason to invite our friends. People don't just wander into church anymore. There was a day when church planting was easy because, in a sense, at least comparatively, because people tended to go to church. People don't tend to go to church anymore. The numbers are all in, and all the polls are saying the same thing. Church is for those who are extraordinarily committed to it, not for those who wander in because they have a loose question in their heads. But people may come if they're invited for a particular purpose, and this is our purpose, church, and we're going to join you in the project of reaching out to our neighborhood. So we're going to become a place for questions. Another thing we're going to do is become a church that reaches out. We're going to take on a theme that has been reverberating through the SBC, and the theme is, who's your one? I've done this, actually, without using the logo and the theme, and we're going to continue to do it and just pick up their way of presenting it. And it's asking this question: if I were to ask you right now, who is it the Lord has put on your heart that you should be praying for? And if you knew that the world was going to come to an end in the next 48 hours, who is it you need to talk to about their eternal state and their relationship with God? What's the first name that comes to your mind? Okay, first, if no names come to your mind, hang on. We'll talk about that too. I would guess for most Christians, and I'm not saying that you're willing to do it. I'm not saying that you're not scared to death. I'm asking what name flashes across the marquee of your head that is somebody you know God has put in your path and that you should be there for. By the way, I've had a number of people in the last 2 or 3 months tell me that when I have said that before, they had a name come to their head, and a couple of people actually told me stories of engagement where they went after them because of that little tickle from the pulpit. We're going to continue the tickle because that's what we're supposed to do. I really feel like a lot of the church is going, well, Gary, where is your outreach program and why isn't it working and what are you doing about it? What I used to say in ministry to people is when they ask what is our outreach program, I tell them, well, you are, and how are we doing? And I think most of us know what the answer to that would be. Oh, well, and that's pretty much the end. So we're going to tighten that up. We're going to tighten that up this year, and we're going to encourage our people to be the evangelistic and outreach program of the church. And this is kind of the theme. It's not really a theme so much as a slogan that's going to remind us to be on task as a church to what we're called to do throughout 2020. So my recommendations, let me run through these and then I'm on time. Here's what I want to see us do. First of all, cultivating an evangelistic perspective rather than a reactionary one. The conservative evangelical church is great about developing a reactionary perspective. Oh, the culture this, the culture that. Oh, we're so abused, we're so attacked, we're so maligned. And all of that may be true. It just doesn't matter. Does it? It doesn't matter. It's true of the church all over the world. It was true of the early church. And when you see Paul, they're dragging him out and stoning. You don't see him getting his bumper stickers and his placards about ill treatment and how, all of this is wrong and we have rights. And I realize we're in a different culture now, but I still think we get pulled off track by this sense of entitlement. But instead of that, what if we were to take all of that and push it off and replace it with a sense of commitment to what Jesus told us to do? He only gave us one thing. Right? How hard is it to focus on one thing? He told us to make disciples of all nations. We need to replace this tendency to be reactionary and persecuted and so forth with an evangelistic fervor. By the way, I want to share with you a slide, Donna, and then we'll have to go back to this one afterwards. You can't see this very well. But this is Kansas. Went to the Kansas-Nebraska Convention of Southern Baptists meeting just this, I don't know, what month was that? Whenever we went recently. And they put this up. This is all the counties. Tim, tell me if I get this wrong, but you see some counties, if you can see them at all, have a green square on them, and some have a purple dot on them. The ones with the green square are counties in which there's no Southern Baptist or other evangelical church. Really, in Kansas. And then the purple dot, there's an evangelical but no Southern Baptist church. So the high priority missions for us are to go to those counties, if we can, where there's no evangelical presence in those. Now, granted, in some of those places, the population is very low, and they know all that, and they're looking into all that. But I saw that, actually, everybody who was there at that meeting said, there you go. Strategically figuring out where we are and what's going on and how we can utilize our resources. This is the beauty, Southern Baptist Church, of us together. This is it. This is the beauty. We are in the last hour, and we have been for some time. This is a difficult day to be a Christian, and it seems to me, as a pastor who spent his entire adult life as an independent Baptist missionary or church planner, it seems to me that this is a day when we need to lock arms and figure out how we can do this together. And all of us, bless Michael's heart, he was sitting in the chair. I thought he was going to jump up and shout when he saw this. And he's like, give me a county. He's ready for us to send him right now. Hang on, Michael, let's finish the degree. But he was ready to roll at that point. This kind of thinking and this kind of strategy and vision can happen on a person's individual level too, right? with my network, with my circle of friends and acquaintances, and in my family? Where do I need to focus my gifts and my resources? Where has God put me? This is good stuff. Let's go back to that other one, Donna. So let's cultivate that evangelistic perspective. Also, we need our members to see themselves as the outreach program of FBC. I've already said this. Seminars, lectures, none of that stuff is going to work or make any difference at all if you're not in this with us. I can't do this. Nobody's going to come because we have a really nice glossy cardstock promo. That doesn't work anymore. It used to be you send out 10,000 flyers to a neighborhood and they said you might get 1%. That was a good response. 1% response, on that $5,000 that you just threw out into the neighborhood. It's probably even lower now. If you're not in on this, none of this is going to make any difference. It's just going to be another sleepy meeting. It doesn't have to be, but it is all up to us. It's not up to me. It's up to us. Finally, we need to take on the mindset of church planters in Shawnee. We are planting a church. This church has a tremendous and a wonderful and an awesome God-honoring history, but it's not alone. The SBC estimates that somewhere between 60 and 80% of their churches are either plateaued or declining. We're not alone. This is not about First Baptist. This is about the day that we are Christians in. Okay, we could curse the darkness. We could talk about how bad things are and kind of whine and pity party our way all through our Christian life. Why do that? That's not what Christianity is. Instead, we should sort of put it all on the table and say, okay, what does it look like now? Where do we go from here? How can we rearrange ourselves? Same God, right? Same calling, same gifting, same opportunity, same sovereign oversight of the Lord over all that's happening around us. I don't need to curse the darkness. Let's just lock arms together. Take on the mindset of people that God's placed us to be here right now and do things like volunteering in the church. We have a number of places, and in the next few weeks you'll be hearing about that, where we need volunteers. And I know a lot of our volunteers are tired. We have some saints, bless their hearts, who volunteered for 40, 50, 60 years here. And I understand that. And in some cases, they can't anymore. That's fine. But we're going to need some volunteers. We started to get younger as a church. That means more children and more babies. Brenda sometimes is doing it almost all by herself back there because she can't get anybody to help. We need more willingness, church. We are church planters now. You're not coming, a spectator anymore. We're church planters. We have to do this together. We need you to support the church financially. This building is, how can I say this, massive. There are rooms I still haven't seen here. When I first came, I was afraid to go in. I'm afraid I wouldn't find my way back. And it's quite a nut for us to crack to keep up with this building. We need you to support the church financially and not politically. Don't hold back because you didn't like the way this or that happened. Be a part of the church. Why? Because it's Christ's church. It's His program to make a difference in our day. There should be a certain austere reverence that we have for the fact that we have been called to be a part of His church and to pool our resources together and make a difference for Him. So I did not mean to say anything negative. Things just are what they are. Things are difficult right now. It's tougher in China. But they're difficult here. We have to adjust a little bit. We have to calibrate. It's okay. Calibration can be great. It can help us to see that some stuff we've been focusing on is just not necessary, and we can free up some resources for other things. That's awesome, because Christ has called us together to be the church and to make a difference in our day. Please listen in the next few weeks as we talk about ways that you can do that, and let's be the church together.